The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Good evening once again, everyone. This is your faithful host, the Squid. I know you're used to hearing me more on Wednesdays, but this week chaos reigned a little bit more than usual, but that is okay. With the help of my lovely producer Sean here, persevering, and we are bringing Foxy and Squid, minus Foxy, unfortunately. She got a little bit extra chaos of her own this week, so once again, the Squid the pilot speaking, getting ready for takeoff. Now, I wanted to be sure to get this week going because this is a very unique week all around. And there's a lot of things that I feel that are pretty topical. Now, as we know, this coming weekend, we will have the Final Four. And Gonzaga, they're the only one of the Final Four I got right with my bracket, which there's a part of me that's no surprise. Everybody's saying the sexy pick is a North Carolina, South Carolina championship game matchup, to which where state supremacy, borders, bathroom bills, all of that could potentially reign supreme if that happens. You got debutantes against one blue blood. Oregon, who's making it for the first time since there were only 4 teams back in 1939. The shorts were longer, the sleeves were non-existent, the footage was in black and white, and everybody pretty much shot free throws underhanded, which, hey, if you're lucky to see enough of the footage from not just the Final Four, but any of those games from back in the day, any sports from back in that time, more power to you. I myself was sent some awesome footage of an old NFL game from 1939 that featured the Detroit Lions during the brief spell where they wore red against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Yes, there was a football team named the Brooklyn Dodgers. That was the time that we were in athletically. I don't question it. Very good marketing tool. God knows if you have 2 teams with the same name and the same colors playing at the same stadium, but you're 2 entirely different sports. Whatever. I mean, at least with New York, you had the baseball giants and the football giants, but they were playing 2 entirely different places. But that's a whole other argument for another day. I gotta be completely honest with my fandom and my listeners. This is the first year in really a very long time where I haven't paid too much attention. I mean, I've seen highlights, I've kept track of the buzzer beaters, the big games, being here in Jacksonville, putting up with everybody going ape shit during the Gators run. I get it, but there was just no real magic around this tournament for me. I mean, I knew where Miami, my main rooting interest, was going to be. I didn't expect them to get too far, which they didn't even get as far as I would have liked, losing in the first round to Michigan State. I had them as a 9 seed, they wound up as an 8 seed, so there was some comfort, but outside of that, there was nothing really special. No intrigue. And to me, I link a part of that to the Ivy League. I mean, year after year after year, I always knew it was tournament time when they always announced the first team to lock their berth, the Ivy League champion. Well, that wasn't the case. This year, it was the winner of the Ohio Valley Conference, which I believe was Jacksonville State. Because for the first time ever, the Ivy League decided to have a conference tournament. Yes, 4 teams out of 8. Yes, it was held at Penn, but they caved. They fell right into the pack. And that, to me, was a little bit of a weird feeling. The one touch of nostalgia I had for March Madness, other than watching bouncing around game to game to game on CBS and having all of your diehards pissed off because they couldn't see their favorite shows, which didn't really matter too much to me because, well, back then, there weren't a lot of CBS shows I watched, so I didn't give a fuck. But that's just me. And as things progressed, Miami was out, so that lost interest. And there were no real upsets. Florida State won, beating Florida Gulf Coast, who beat my alma mater, UNF, so that really kind of cut me out of things. And right when everybody was complaining that, oh, the first weekend, it's chalk, it's predictable, upsets are predictable. I mean, this tournament, you have great quality of games, but other than that, it's boring. What is this? Where is this? And then Wisconsin told America, hey, hold my beer. They beat the number 1 seed and defending champions, and that really started the snowball to kind of where we are now. But maybe it's just something with me. Maybe because I was in tune with different sports. I kept more of an eye on baseball, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm keeping more of an eye on Major League Soccer for Soccer to the Max and World Cup qualifying for that and other projects, and gearing up for arena football, which I just wrapped up our season preview for this week in the AFL. March Madness, it was really just a back burner to me. It became background noise. Now, I know the entire country is never going to completely feel the way I feel, but I don't know. What if Oregon doesn't make this run? What if Villanova wins that game? What if you don't have South Carolina on this path? What if you don't have Gonzaga finally getting over their biggest hurdle and making their first ever Final Four? Are those the intrigue that really saved the tournament in a sense? I mean, as is, you had games broadcast on TBS. As is, there was no drama or uproar or bitching or riots when the field was announced. Everybody was just like, okay. Kind of saw a lot of this coming. And this is for the men's tournament. For the women, don't even get me started. Again, Hurricanes, valiant effort, winning and then being upset at home by, of all teams, Quinnipiac. Not sure how that happened, but whatever. But the team to beat, as they have been for 110 games, it's UConn. They're winning. They had, at the beginning of the tournament, a 40% chance of winning it all, which, yeah, everybody's saying that's really nothing to sneeze at, but let me break something down to you. The way probabilities work when you're talking about teams like UConn winning it all, 40% is somewhat deceptive, but here's why 40% is actually big as fuck. Say, throwing a number out there, you have a 90% chance of winning your first round game. That's one game. You have to go through that 5 more times. Well, say you have a 90% chance of winning your second round game. You have to multiply those two together. So already, you're at just over 80% of just making it to the Sweet 16. We'll say you do, and you have a 90% chance of winning that game. Now you're down into the 70s to make the Elite Eight. And even if you keep that same train, 90%, 90%, 90%, 90%, you keep degrading because you have to multiply because every single game is different. All of a sudden, after 6 games, you're at 40, 50%. But that's still a hell of a lot of confidence for you to make that step in every subsequent step. So when you see teams like South Carolina back on the men's side, they had a 0.5% chance to make the Final Four. As a 7 seed, that's reasonable. Very few seeds lower than a 7 make the Final Four. No team lower than a 6 has ever won a title. That was in the first year of a 64-team field, Villanova playing the perfect game against Georgetown in 1985. So when you're looking at that, and you're looking at the percentages of these probabilities of these games, some of them were respectable, 40, 50 some percent. Others were in the 20s. That works against you. So, all of the hype about that, it's just math. And because of that math, really a lot of this has happened too late for me to want to invest and want to capture, because I'm the type of guy, if you don't have me that first weekend, you're not going to have me. I'm going to be doing other things, helping with taxes, tutoring, just watching other sports. That's what's going to consume my time and attention. Sorry, NCAA, I'm still watching lacrosse. I'm still keeping an eye on the Frozen Four. But you're not getting me as a basketball fan this year, this tournament. Maybe next year, maybe things change, maybe things tweak. I don't know. But for this year, I mean, I had to pass. Good luck to those in the Final Four. I had Gonzaga at least making the title game. I would love to see UConn complete their journey and really continue to be who they were, in dominance never before really seen. The only teams that can really come close is John Wooden's teams of the early 70s, where they had the big 88-game win streak, back-to-back perfect seasons, among a string of titles. Right now, UConn's on that level, and then until they get beat, which would only be the second time in some 150 games, there's just no feeling. I don't know. Maybe that's me. But from one tournament that I didn't pay attention to one tournament that I tried to pay attention to. That's the World Baseball Classic. Now, we're on the heels of opening day. I know my Rays are going to be unfortunately mediocre, sitting in a division with the Red Sox, who've made a bunch of moves and are trying to outdo the Yankees, and the Blue Jays trying to prove that things weren't a fluke, and the Orioles getting back to it and trying to help Buck Showalter get a World Series and all these things. And it's going to go back to the old days, and for me, in the old days of the AL East, but that's not why I mentioned the World Baseball Classic. And MLB Network, I'm pissed off at you. Now, during the first round, especially when you had pools A and B, in Tokyo and in Seoul, South Korea, I was able to at times stay up late to catch a bit of the action, or you would be good enough to have games on to where I could have them on at the TV in my den as I'm getting ready, heading out the door to go to work. And I thank you for that. But beyond that, what the fuck happened? From Pool C and Pool D, Miami, Jalisco, all throughout the second round and through the championship round at Dodger Stadium, you had some major signal issues. Were you by too much water? Did you not feed the hamsters? Did somebody shine a laser beam out into space and did it fuck up your satellite? Because time and time again, I would go to watch a game and I couldn't stand it after a couple of minutes because it kept freezing, stopping, and starting, and I would miss about every third or fourth word of what the announcers were saying. And even if it is Matt Vasgersian, I mean, come on, you just can't keep me in tune, and you're going to give me shitty visuals. There were a lot of great games. There was a lot of controversy. China going back to their old ways, having to qualify. Chinese Taipei having to qualify. Korea finishing third on their home field. Mexico having to qualify on their home field, finishing last because of tiebreakers, and factoring in what happened with Italy in the bottom of the ninth, scoring 5 runs without recording an out, and that throwing calculations into a clusterfuck. Now, granted, I was able to see that moment, in that ninth inning, clean and live, and it was fucking epic. So there was a bright spot, but for all the good that the Netherlands did, the Dominican back picking up where they left off in 2013, Israel, for fuck's sake, going undefeated in the first round and holding their own in the second round. You had a lot of high spots, and you had me going. And arguably, who's become my second favorite pitcher behind R.A. Dickey, seeing little old Marcus Stroman out there dealing, seeing Chris Archer for my Rays dealing. You had intrigue. You had moments. You had some pretty awesome fucking baseball that really you accomplished your mission diverting me away from spring training. I mean, normally I would be pissed at myself that right at the end of spring training, you have 3 ties in a single day. I don't get to see any of them. Normally I would want to go up to New York and Studio 42 and start cracking some heads. But I didn't, because you gave me the World Baseball Classic. But then you go ahead and you take that away from me. Bad enough that it was only on MLB Network. ESPN, you kind of dropped the ball on that one. FS1, I hope in 2021 you got your precious World Cup. Try to do some angling for some of that. Try to get some of these games. You're going to get good ratings. Can you give me better visuals? Can another network step in and say, hey, you'll see the complete game? Just trust me. Put down the remote. Get some cider. Mix it with some sparkling Dasani, which tastes god-awful. Get yourself some inventions. Get some snacks. Get some desserts. Sit there in nothing but your robe, just chilling. Being on social media, getting into more conundrums, which I'll talk about later on. But you go do that. We'll give you the game. We'll give you the game. It's all good. I want other networks to do that. I want other networks to try to push to do that. Because if this is going to be how it is with MLB Network, and yes, I know the whole online thing, this and that, but a lot of times it's not convenient, especially for me. So, if you can't tear me away and kind of do that, you're not doing yourself any favors as a network. You're not doing the tournament any favors for what would be its 5th edition and beyond. So, think about that, MLB Network. You're here. I love you. I watch you. Fix this shit. Lock this shit down. Clean it up. For my sake, and I'm sure for a lot of other people's sake. Now, for those that don't know, there have been patterns with the World Baseball Classic. 2006, Japan was the team to beat. Korea, their neighbors, gave them hell. Beat them a couple times, as they wound up facing each other 3 times. First round, second round, semifinal. Because of that performance, everybody on that Korean team given an exemption from their mandatory 2 years of military service. I think that's a cool deal. First, the fact that mandatory service is only 2 years is a big plus. Compared to some other countries, like I believe their neighbors across the DMZ in North Korea, it's 13, which, yeah, you'd expect that from North Korea. But they love their sports. They recognize them as heroes, just like kids would. And you throw them a big bone like that, that's a cool thing. 2009, it was a similar vein. They again met 3 times, first round, second round, final. Japan won again. Koreans got the exemption again, which, again, very valiant effort. But then the tide started turning. And I was thinking to myself as I was watching this World Baseball Classic, in 2013, and I had a good friend predict this. I remember it was sadly one of the last conversations we had because that October, he would wind up, unfortunately, passing away. But he said, who can you look at to get your players from your country and create a team of all-stars? I thought he was nuts when he said it was going to be between Puerto Rico, who, for even when they had hosted earlier iterations of the tournament, they'd been there, but you could still feel they'd underachieved, and the Dominican Republic, which baseball is their thing. It's their sport. It's their ticket out. But you don't have a lot of overall strength like you did, especially at those times, Japan and South Korea. Nevertheless, he was right. In 2013, it was Puerto Rico and the Dominican who met 3 times. First round, second round, final. And the Dominican took it all. So, I came into this year thinking, we in the U.S. aren't really going to have a chance in hell. And given just the sheer stacked amount of talent, big names all over the place, and guys just wanting to play, the Dominican saving his spot for Adrian Beltre to the bitter end, and Yadier Molina getting Team 1 to be out there and help get teams together 3 years in advance. I thought it was going to come down to these 2 teams yet again. Then as the tournament progressed, I saw, well, who could potentially meet 3 times. Japan, being Japan, they were back. Cruise control through the first 2 rounds at home. And upstarts in the Netherlands, which I want to thank Lek van Miel as he was pitching to the Israeli I believe he was a designated hitter, Fryman. The tallest matchup in the history of baseball. Well, they said it was probably this because they couldn't get back to early days in records. And in my mind, yeah, bullshit. How many people do you know of in the 1870s and 80s that were legit walking the planet Earth 6'8", 7 foot, 7'1"? Let alone fucking playing baseball. Come on now. I've seen the old-timey games. I've seen the uniforms, which are actually kind of badass. I've seen the reenactments and the recreations. You really think that was a game for people who really, genetically didn't exist? Go back and see the statistics. So no. Yes, I'm calling it. That was the tallest matchup in the history of baseball. Fryman, 6'8". Lek Van Meel, 7'1". To very little surprise, it didn't end in a walk, which, boy, that would have been a freakish trivia question. That one nobody would have seen coming. But you had those little things. In the Netherlands, runners up in Pool A, runners up in Pool E. So I was thinking to myself, these could be the two teams that could meet in the final. That didn't really pan out. With Puerto Rico and the Dominican being in different pools, the Dominican was in Pool C along with the U.S. and Miami, whereas Puerto Rico was with Mexico, Venezuela, and the Italians, in Pool D in Mexico. They didn't really clash for the first time until the second round. It was a great game. I believe the Dominican won. Might have been Puerto Rico. I'd have to go back and look at that. But I thought, well, hey, with the way these two teams are and their talent, they could easily meet again in the final. What happens? The U.S. actually gives a shit. Now, to a certain extent, you have guys, a lot of them turned down the WBC. Big names, Bryce Harper coming out off of injury. A lot of guys didn't want to fuck with their pitching schedules because it's very strict in the WBC and you're realistically only getting 3 starts over the course of 2 weeks. And even then, you're on a severely limited pitch count. 65 in the first round, which will only get you through 4, maybe 5 innings. 85 in the second round, which now you're getting into maybe the 6th, maybe early in the 7th. And then 90 in the championship round, semifinals and final, which, if you're efficient, that can get you to the 9th. But you're not like Johnny Vandermeer, who go out throw a no-hitter, or guys that could go pitch complete games and only throw 58 pitches. You're not at that level anymore. You're not asked to be that anymore. So with all the hubbub about Mike Trout saying, oh, I'll play in 2021, it's like, no, why didn't you play now? Adam Jones with his great catch against the Dominican in Miami, up against the wall, that got turned into a trading card, which, promotion all around, it's a good thing. We cared. We advanced. Going on in the first round, playing and winning a winner-take-all game against the Dominican in the second round in San Diego, beating, of all teams, Japan in a nail-biter in the semifinal, and then shutting out Puerto Rico, who was 7-0. in the championship game, beating them handily, 8-0. I saw that scoreline and I was surprised. I thought, where was this in 06? Where was this in 09? Where was this in 2013? Jesus, we came close to damn near inventing the whole sport. You would have thought that we would have shown our ass at least once before now, but we finally did. But, of course, it's not just a simple win. There's that moment of controversy. Adam Jones pissed off about the Puerto Ricans planning their parade at home before the semifinals and before they'd even won it all and this and that and saying, hey, why don't you have a little more class and this and that and yada, yada, yada. Yadier Molina was like, dude, look, you're in spring training, you're working out, you're getting ready for the season. Yeah, we finished second, but I'm at home, I'm with my people, we're partying. Fuck's that say about you? And I kind of agree. There are some moments where even if you don't win, fucking enjoy. I mean, has anybody noticed what's been happening to Puerto Rico the last few years? They're broke. Times are not good on the island, and especially thanks to President Kim Trunk-Dong, that's not going to change anytime soon. Another thing that pisses me off. So, yeah, they're gonna party. Yeah, they're gonna have fun. Yeah, they're gonna drink rum. Yeah, they're gonna dye their hair blonde. I say, go for it. You need a moment. And hats off to Yadier Molina for understanding that. Hats off to the people going out, doing their thing, and showing that pride, because this is one of the few moments that they've really had. And they need more. And I'm hoping things change to where they can get more. But for now, Yachty's going to go back to the Cardinals. Going to go back to catching his ass off, as arguably they're going to be in really one of the toughest races with the Cubs, who enter a season as defending world champions for the first time since 1909. Oy, that alone is just weird to say. But you still got the Pirates doing something. God knows the Brewers and Reds are probably still out to lunch, but what have you. That could wind up, as a side note, being one of the toughest divisions in baseball. But on the whole, with the U.S. winning, somewhat out of nowhere, I think between this and the Cubs last year, and then even the Indians last year, I got to give them a ton of credit, even though, well, add what happened in last year's World Series to Red Right 88, the drive, the fumble, the Arena Bowl. Sorry, Colin Taylor. I hope you're not listening to this. I just interviewed him with This Week in the NFL. 1989, I could go on and on and on to bad moments in Cleveland sports history. And now that they're getting it together, the Cavaliers, the Cleveland Monsters, and it's happening to the Indians, like, still stings, still hurts, but give them credit because they've made things just a little more interesting. The Cubs have made this a little more interesting. And now, with the U.S. winning the World Baseball Classic, this not only reinvigorates a lot of key debate, baseball's standing in world sports, now 3 years away from what could possibly be a triumphant return in the Olympics in Tokyo, of all places, in 2020. But this just says Yes, this does have standing, and now every single team with a WBC player, those that were proud to wear USA on the front, now you have a reason to follow them. You have a reason for the Chris Archer, for the Strowmans, for the Jones, for all of these guys. They're going to have a few more eyeballs on them as they progress through the 162-game, 180-day grind that is the MLB regular season. And I think with the way that baseball's been, this is going to help. You've had some big strides. Oakland, now that the Raiders are going to move to Vegas, and I'll save that topic for another show, but that could settle the whole situation with the stadium for the A's, since they'll eventually have it all to themselves. That actually will help clear another hurdle for Rob Manfred for expansion, because guess what? Within the next decade, it's going to happen. You as a commissioner don't come out with a checklist and say, all right, we have to get through the CBA. They did. We have to get things sorted out in Tampa Bay. We have to get things sorted out in Oakland. Then we're going to expand. To make it easier for scheduling. To make it easier for travel. That'll mean tweaking to the playoffs. I've got some theories on that and hope to get to some of those as the season progresses, but this could turn out to be a very pivotal moment, not just for MLB, but are we really serious about baseball again? Can we stay serious? Excuse me again. Can we keep this momentum going through 20, through 21, through 24, and onward? As a new generation of potential fans, potential players, grows up. Well, time will tell. Alas, I touched on the Cubs, how they enter this season. There's another team that broke an extremely long title drought. A team that, thanks to YouTube, thanks to, back in the old days, Fox Soccer Channel, or even before Fox Soccer Channel, this was back when it was Fox Sports World. So we're talking early to mid-2000s. The team I got to fall in love with. Way down under in Australia. Now, Australian Football League, arguably the most unique sport on the planet, for good reason and for badass reasons, their season just started up again. They just wrapped up their first week, going into week 2 this coming weekend. The Western Bulldogs, proudly honoring and representing the western suburbs of Melbourne. They enter this season reigning premiers, and that's the first time anyone's been able to say that since they were Footscray back in the days of the Victorian Football League in '55. The good news is history repeated itself. After winning the premiership in '54, they faced Collingwood Magpies at the MCG, round 1 in '55. They crushed them then, winning by 56 points. This year, not so much crushing, outplayed in a lot of ways, but they held on and got the win, 100-86 at the MCG. For those of you who don't know, Melbourne Cricket Ground, arguably one of the most famous venues in Australia, the most famous venue of Melbourne. Home ground to many of the Melbourne teams, and of course, as it has been since really was built in the early days of the VFL, going on and on to when you had consistent grand finals in the 20s, home to the grand final. So naturally, my dogs, I'm going to keep following them this season. And if anybody out of the kindness of their heart wants to throw a little bit of money my way so I can go ahead and get myself a jumper, at Squid Sportshead, hit me up. I am open to negotiations. We'll talk. But they're not the only team I'm going to be following this season. As a lot of you who know me know, I am a pretty major presence on Instagram. At Superviewer, follow at your own risk. I'm only going to say that. But because of Instagram, I get to see a lot of things, interact with a lot of people, see a lot of things that pique my curiosity, and I want to give a shout out to one particular Instagram model, at Purple Hazy Girl. Spelled like it sounds, Purple Hazy, Hazy Girl. Very attractive. Posts a lot of nice photos. I give her that. But when my friend showed me the one particular post, she immediately said, although she's not a major sports person, she loves the AFL. Something about it always gets her going. And I immediately felt that inkling of a kindred spirit. She happens to barrack the Richmond Tigers. No beef with them, no real rivalry against them. Good team, but really, aside from hitting their peak in the 70s or the 80s, they haven't been terribly much of a factor. But because of her, knowing that there are fans out there like her, and yes, even after I saw the Vice Sports documentary about the biggest rivalry in the league and the biggest rivalry in the country, Carlton and Collingwood, I'll keep a bit of an eye on the Tigers for her. Now, granted, if they beat my dogs, I'm still going to be mad. I'm going to be pissed about it because I would like to see Western do a little bit better than 7th in the home and away season. Even though that's how they finished last year, and well, hey, they've got the cup in their trophy case. Still, I'm going to throw a little bit of a bone. I'll keep an eye on them. It's fair. Going from teams starting up to leagues winding down, NBA, NHL, we're a couple of weeks from the playoffs. Now, unfortunately, my Florida Panthers had to deal with some key injuries in the middle of the season, chaos early in the season, firing head coach Gerard Gallant, which I still think was stupid. He led the team to only their second division title in franchise history, over 100 points. Great position to be in the playoffs, but he couldn't help that key guys like Barkov and Huberdeau, they got hurt. Yet, since they were struggling out of the gate, came down to a point to where had all his suitcases packed up, took a cab, and flew home separately from the team. Tom Rowe, general manager, went behind the bench. Things mostly stayed the same. Then the team got healthy, stayed hot. But unfortunately, recently, injuries crept up again, had a terrible stretch, and now are pretty much done and toast. They were, at last check, 7 points out of a wild card spot, 2-3 teams to leap over, with only, at that point, 8 games left to play, even less than that now that they're done. And I'm disappointed in that. But for the NHL season, I didn't think the Blackhawks would bounce back like they did. knowing they had a lot of major losses of talent from the team that just won the Cup 2 years ago, lo and behold, they're in the race for the President's Trophy. The Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that I still don't really think should exist. Ohio, you're Midwestern, you're football, you're basketball. Who there gives a fuck about NHL hockey? Now, granted, Cleveland Monsters in the AHL, different story. They have a very good fan base, very good ownership. They've been rewarded with the Calder Cup. But Columbus has just been there. Just been blah. This year they shut me up. Going on a torrid winning streak. They've got over 100 points. They're right up there with Chicago, with Pittsburgh, defending Cup champions, with Washington, perennial contenders, in the race for the President's Trophy. The team with the best regular season record. You've got teams like Minnesota in the Central Division. That's still giving everybody hell. One of the toughest divisions in the NHL. You've got Edmonton finally getting it together and poised to be in the playoffs for the first time since, as an 8 seed, went all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals back in 2006. I was rooting for them that night against Carolina because I really didn't like Carolina. Still don't. Unfortunately, that didn't work. Glad to see Doug Weight win a cup, though. He was always one of those players that held the teeny piece of my heart. But for a nation that invented the sport, not having key teams for long stretches of time, especially like Edmonton, who a lot of the older fans out there definitely remember from the Gretzky days in the golden age throughout the 80s and into early 90s. Now they've got young talent. They're back. So, even though my Panthers are pretty much out of it, I'm excited to see the Stanley Cup playoffs. I really am, because there's a lot going on, and especially with the way that the playoffs are set up, which I still disagree with, because you have two teams, two conferences with even teams in the divisions. I really hope the NHL will wise up, even with the addition of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which they could have done a lot better in the name, but so be it. Even with the addition of them in the Pacific Division. Could you really go back to the old days where it was just a top four and you had to fight out for a division title in the playoffs? It worked for you then. You're almost setting it up with the wild cards now. But with how you have the conferences formatted, the wild card format doesn't make too much sense to me. Still going to watch, but Bettman, you may need to fix that. With the NBA, I thought at the beginning of the season, and yes, it's on record, I didn't think the Warriors would do as well as they have. But ho-hum, number one in the West, shooting the lights out, fending off San Antonio. I still don't think they're going to get back to the finals. If they do, they do. It'll set up a potentially great rematch against Cleveland, but Cavaliers are on a bit of thin ice with Boston chasing them for the 1 seed in the East out of nowhere. Those are going to be some of the matchups I'm going to look at, because even with Mr. Triple-Double this year, Russell Westbrook, let's face it, Oklahoma City is going to be lucky if they even get to the second round. MVP candidate James Harden and the Houston Rockets, they're going to be lucky if they get to the conference finals. The Clippers, this is their last chance to even think about taking the city of LA from the Lakers. If they don't do anything this year, which they're poised not to, well then, hey, Magic Johnson's the man in charge for the purple and gold. You had your chance and you pretty much shat on it. Sorry about your luck. You can thank David Sterling for taking you out of San Diego where you could have fared better. Especially now that the Chargers are going. Oh well. I'm going to wind down with a couple more things tonight. I explained to Sean and Rachel at the McCreeger, Rachel McCreeger, yes, the with two E's, co-host of Soccer to the Max. If you're listening, I know you wait on bated breath for my conundrums. And I know we've talked about them in the past, and I have to make a confession to you. When I said my conundrum situation was stable, I spoke too soon. Because a couple of things have happened this week. My ex, which things really ended kind of ugly, thanks to, well, I'll be generous and say mutual baggage, because I had some drama that I was going on, especially when we were going out, which was about closer to 8 years ago. Boy, was that a weird time in my life. But we stayed friends, had opportunities to be a bit more, but it wasn't meant to be. She's off with a good friend of mine, and she's been happy, but she's been resurfacing, asking me for now a couple of Saturday nights to go and hang out with her. And I'm just like, she always asks me 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, which if I'm not already out somewhere, I'm home, might be drunk, I'm exhausted. I've usually had a long week, which these past few weeks have especially been the case. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want a lot of old memories with you coming back. Yeah, I have great memories of that club and a lot of adventures and shenanigans happening, but yeah, I haven't hung out with you a lot of times because I've been busy, but she really made a choice. She claims she's happy, and I get that she needs a friend, especially because she's had a lot of major family developments come up, and I wish you all the best, but it's like, I'm not going to take time when I could be doing something that I want to do and something that I have to do something that I eventually know it's not going to be what I want. Yeah, we made arrangements to where he would willingly allow me to have anal sex, but you and I both know that that's gone out the window. That's what I wanted. That to be something that would still creep in the back of my mind. You're not in a position to do that. I respect that. Just leave it at that. We do hang out, which I admit I want to. It's just going to happen just on different terms. I'm sorry. I see you around and you still look the way I look, especially with your eyes when I first met you and it drew me into you, and I know of your past, your different shenanigans that initially attracted me to you, that little dirty side, but you're not the same. I'm not the same. But I would want the same thing. Just because that's me. It's my situation. It's my conundrums. That would be me getting what I want. And now, over the past couple of days, I've been talking to someone else via Snapchat who admittedly is going through a bit of a tough time herself, not anywhere near as bad, but oh my god. It's attractive, long hair, freckles, 19-year-old ginger, and I mean ginger, complete with bush. Ugh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's got a few messages that I'm going to have to check after the show on my phone, but yeah, she's become yet another conundrum. Now, I know I'm not at 1.5. I know I'm not at 2.5. And for those of you math geeks, I'm going to describe my current number of conundrums as this. 1.5 plus x, such that x is an element of R lying in the open interval of 0 and 1. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means and you're really curious, tweet at me, again, at Squid Sportshead, and I will gladly explain it to you. I even had to make sure that in my mind I had framed it out right, written down, because I haven't written anything like that in terms of math that intensive in 6 years. The joys of graduate school. But I guess I'm wondering, does this mean I'm evolving? Does this mean that my situation with conundrums is still stable? Right when the universe had me sad because an old dance studio that was a few minutes from my house was torn down. And I drove by that studio every day running errands or off the work and thinking, if I could just hit it big once. Buy that studio. Give it to my best friend so she could continue with her belly dancing and teaching classes and doing all that stuff all her own. If I could do that, I'd be happy. When I saw that it was disappeared, piles of dirt, construction company sign in front, I was sad. Bummed me out for a little while. But I guess the universe is giving me these sort of conundrums to have me be happy. And thankfully for my best friend, she's going on to do a lot of great things, especially this week. Shout out to my girl Phoenix. Things are going well for her. And that makes me feel good. So I guess the universe, again, doesn't want me too sad. And finally, adding a little bit of extra craziness. Take these last few minutes to delve into the latest harrows of politics, as I like to call This Week in Misery. Looks like for Mr. Fanta in office, 45's wannabe empire's fallen apart. His Muslim ban is on track to be shut down yet again. A lot of key people have developed even more ties to Russia, monetary in terms of Manafort being paid $10 million a year from a Russian billionaire, and all kinds of ties and money to the tune of $1 million in one transaction going through the Bank of Cyprus. Mike Flynn wanting to cut deals. Devin Nunes looking like the farm boy that he is from California. People are ratting on him, turning on him and his sources to undermine the investigation. I guess what started out as misery turned to chaos and finally hope that, well, things are holding up for the country, falling apart for him. We still have healthcare, which is a tremendous plus. Me personally, because I do purchase my health insurance through the exchange, and 24 million people at minimum would no longer have that privilege, wouldn't even be able to afford insurance. We're safe on that for now. But I have to warn everybody that it's not over. Because if things don't change before April 29th, government's going to run out of money. We will have hit the debt ceiling, and we would no longer be able to make any sort of interest payments or pay our bills or work on anything else. Yet that's not been talked about. It's been healthcare. It should have been. It's been investigations into collusion, in hacking, in mentions of bots, which it should still be. But let's not forget what's potentially coming around the horizon, because things could, unfortunately, still get worse. I just hope things get better before they do, because, yeah, I don't want to see the stock market go into a fucking tailspin. I can't afford a bunch of gold. So, all right now we can do is wait and see. But alas, that is the end of me show. I pretty much covered everything, and I'm just sitting right now sweating, and I think I'm going to go and grab myself a drink. But before I do, I will casually remind you all, you can still hear my dulcet tones. Go back. Just wrapped up the season premiere of This Week in the AFL. You still hear me as many weeks as I possibly can here on Foxy and Squid. Trying to get the Fox, maybe have to go on a Fox hunt to get her back on the show. I don't know. I have various ways and means to take care of that. And you'll still hear myself, Rachel McCrieger, and our lovely producer Sean on Soccer to the Max. Yes, we are dedicated to where we will be up at midnight post-match for the U.S. and World Cup qualifying if we have to. Now, granted, can I guarantee sobriety? No. Well, especially on Fridays. But that's beside the point. Otherwise, do episodes of that every Sunday. But alas, I bid you adieu. Do your homework, and don't you dare forget to be awesome.
The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.